Hi, friends, and welcome to the Dreamer and Doer podcast. I'm your host, Bree Johnson. I designed this space to be a place that we can discuss dreaming big despite the setbacks and fears that come with it. I invite you to come along this journey with me as we embrace our stories and share our journeys. So let's dream big together and get intentional about making it happen. Hey there, friends. Welcome back to the Dreamer and Doer podcast. I guess it's no secret that it's been about 3 weeks since our last episode, and I'm so sorry, but really that happened when we first released this, and I'm going to get back into the swing of things, and we're going to make this happen, right? That's what this podcast is all about, dreaming and doing. And honestly, I think it's a pretty good example of what it's like to pursue your dreams. Sometimes it's not easy, and you want to quit, but don't let one setback hold you up from pursuing what has been put on your heart. I'll be honest and say that there's been times where I have wanted to quit very recently and just kind of throw in the towel with everything and move on and find something else. But I'm really trying to force myself to stay in the hard places and to just do the thing, right? I can make up all the excuses in the world, and I'll get to that. First off, I just wanted to thank you guys for tuning in. It honestly means the world when you guys reach out to me and let me know things that you've loved about an episode, guests that you've loved having on, and just how you've been able to connect and relate to people. And then, we recently moved to Waco this past year. And so it's been fun to use it as a way to keep in touch with friends back at home. I don't always get to talk on the phone, not just because of me, but just because we all have very busy lives going on, and sometimes it's just hard to stop. And so I had one friend recently tell me, she was like, I listened to all of your podcast episodes in 3 days because I missed you and I wanted to hear what was going on in your life. And so that kind of brought an idea to just share a little bit more about me. Goals would be to have 2 episodes released a week, one with a guest and one with just me, 5 Minute Friday. Let's be real. I probably could not talk for just 5 minutes. It would probably be a little bit longer than that. But I would just love to share a little bit more personally of what's going on in our lives or things that I've been learning. And so tonight, yes, it's tonight. You will listen to this probably not at night. Maybe you will. But tonight I am coming from a hotel business center. I am here in Houston photographing a wedding tomorrow, which is Saturday, and my family also happened to be in Houston this weekend. So my kids are upstairs, probably not sleeping with their grandparents. That's just how hotel life is. And I decided that I would come downstairs and work out and record a podcast because I have been making excuses and I'm just tired of it. That feeling where you just get so tired of the things you're doing. You're, I guess, kind of like rock bottom. That sounds kind of dramatic, but just where you're so tired of it, you almost feel gross being in your own skin. That probably sounds really dramatic, but that's just how I feel right now. I'm so tired of having these dreams and things that I want to get done. And then when it gets hard, I just make an excuse to not do them. Well, if I only had this, if I only had that. And I was listening to this song and it just kind of hit me do the little things, keep saying yes, keep taking one step in front of the other, even if it looks like failure at times. One thing I have been encouraged about is that there are several people that I look up to, and I realized the reason I look up to them is not only because of the things they've done, but because literally they are older than me. And I while I would like to see, success and be able to support my family with these things, I also realize that I am still really young and I don't have to have all this figured out tomorrow. And these people who I feel like have made it are also several years older than me. And I think their success comes with life experience and things that they've gone through and learning when to say yes in seasons, learning when to say no, learning when to add on, learning when to take away. And so that's just kind of been encouraging to me, is if I keep putting one foot in front of the other, I will see the results later. Maybe they're not right now, which is really disappointing and hard for someone who, I'll be honest, I love instant gratification. I want to see results from, my hard work. So I got off on a little tangent, like a 4-minute one, but I wanted to start off with 2 things. One, if you love listening to the podcast, I would love if you left a review on iTunes. While I love when you reach out, I'd also love if you just left a little review. And if you shared this with a friend, maybe share your favorite episode, tell them about the show. My goal and vision is to see this podcast take off this year. That sounds really vain. But, we work really hard on this when we do it. It's a lot of time and effort. And so, yeah, I would love to see it grow. And I don't think that's a bad goal to have. It does sound vain at times, but we'd love to see it grow. A really good way to help us grow our podcast is if you leave a review and subscribe. It's really simple. You can just write a couple words, tell us what you think, leave a little encouragement, and share with your friends. And hopefully, we'll see the biggest growth we've seen. If you've enjoyed listening, I would really appreciate it if you helped us grow by leaving a review and subscribing to the podcast. I mean, such a simple thing to do, but it really helps us. So the second thing I wanted to let you guys know is that we are going to be at Spring at the Silos. I am so excited to be back in Magnolia. We had such an amazing time at Celebration, and I cannot wait to be a part of Spring at the Silos. If you're listening to this right now, stop and pray that we have amazing weather, okay? Because while Celebration was great, the weather wasn't really on our side, and I would love to see just like the most amazing weekend. Perfect weather, tons of people. Let's pray it for all the vendors and all the teams at Magnolia. They put in so much work to make these events happen that I would just love to see a beautifully amazing, perfect weather weekend. That didn't even make sense. I've been hanging out with toddlers too long. It is what it is. In today's episode, I want to talk about something that's been on my heart and something that I wanted to share with you guys, because as I've been thinking about the podcast and the direction I wanted to take, I think it only makes sense that it comes into something that I always have in common, and that's just being multi-passionate. I love being able to share business stories and encourage people that way, but I also just enjoy sharing stories. And so I've been thinking about how I would incorporate those 2 things. So, I think there's been a good balance of people sharing their stories and their struggles as a part of their business, but I want to see more of it. Maybe someone has a story that they want to tell, but they're like, oh, I don't own a business, but I'd like to tell it. I just don't feel like there's a place for me. So I want to tell you there's a place for you. If you have a story you want to tell, I would love for you to be a part of a series that I want to start called Bring It to Light. The heart and vision behind Bring It to Light is that I want people to be able to have a platform to share their stories, to encourage other people. That's something I really value. And I know every person has a story that's uniquely them, in that they've walked things and lived things and no one else will ever walk that. But there's pieces of that that are encouraging to someone else walking through something similar. And so as I was thinking about Bring It to Light, I kept thinking about how so many of us struggle with different things that we feel like we have to hide it. And I feel like the longer we try to hide it, the easier it is to hide it, whether that leads us into denial or we just kind of stuff it down and fix it with behavior modification, yet the wound's still there. Or we feel like we're walking alone and no one else has felt these things, and that we're walking through it in shame. And as we walk through it in the darkness, the shame just gets heavier and the guilt gets heavier. And soon we find ourselves with like our shoulders slumped over and we're just carrying this heavy burden that we feel like will never go away. If there's anything I've learned over the past several years, it's that when we bring those things to light, that we can finally begin to feel lighter. I know once we bring those things to light, that the darkness no longer has power over us. And you guys, it is so scary. It is so scary to share those things. Nobody wants to. No one wants to like open their heart. And I'm sure like you've heard this 100 times from other people. But I have this heart and vision to see so many people become free of these like internal struggles and that they can share it openly. And I guess why I feel like so many people feel like it's maybe over talked about is because with social media, we've even perfected messy life, you know? And part of me struggles with it because I see people's feeds and they're like, open and they're sharing these things, but then there's just a piece of it that you're like, I know I've taken the Instagram classes. I know you're supposed to share these like vulnerable stories and that helps like grow your following. So it's just hard to weed out like what's real, what's not, what's genuine. And I don't think anyone who's sharing these stories aren't trying to be disingenuous, but at the same time, does it make you wonder? Because sometimes I'm like, yeah, you struggle with that, but maybe like my struggle's more. I struggle with more. I'm living in more darkness. But I mean, you guys, why are we even like comparing our bad stories? I'm just getting on a tangent now. Why do we care who has the sadder sob story? That's not the purpose of sharing them. The purpose is to connect, right? And so I just have this desire to see us connect, but not just connect over the struggles and stay there, but to move on. Like, I think that's another thing is I just see people bring it to light, but then because they've brought it to light and they've confessed to struggling with something, then they just stay there. And I think that's just as devastating as keeping it inside. And so what does it look like to partner with one another as we share these vulnerable things and then help each other grow and move on from it? And not saying move on, but like let those wounds start to heal. Because I've also learned like so much of our behavior comes from these wounds that we've experienced. So it's not the behavior that's the problem. It's because there's a deeper wound. So for instance, oh gosh, should I be open and share marriage stuff? Because Kendall edits these, but whatever, it's fine. Kendall and I, we've been married for almost 8 years. We've changed a lot in these past 8 years. I think it's inevitable that parenthood changes you. Needs are different. Wants are different. You start to feel loved in different ways. It changes. And maybe you haven't even had kids. Maybe you've gone through a loss or grief or something else has happened and it changes you to the core of who you are, right? And so one of my, I would say a trigger wound for me is to not feel enough. And so if I were to do a job or do something and I don't necessarily get complimented on it, which I guess is selfish. I shouldn't feel that way. But if, I do something and then maybe Kendall says, well, you didn't do this, then I immediately lash out in anger and I'm like yelling at him. Well, not yelling, but, bickering. Well, why didn't you do this? I immediately turn on the offense and I put it on him that he did something wrong. But really the wound comes from that I'm not enough. And whenever that wound gets triggered, maybe it comes out in anger. For me, it's manifested in ways like binge eating. Maybe even, like bitterness building up because I get frustrated that I feel like I'm doing the right thing, but then I'm not. So that's just like one instance. So I really had to work on getting to that core lie and figuring out what it is. And honestly, at one point in my life, I was like, yeah, I realized that's what it is. I thought I was healed. I thought I moved on. And then I just realized the struggle is always there. And I know one touch from Jesus can change everything. But, it took me back the next couple times where I felt those feelings of not feeling enough. And honestly, the burden of not feeling enough feels a lot lighter now. So when those lies do pop up, it's a lot easier to combat those lies, but I feel more empowered now to fight that battle than I did several years ago, but it's still there. I've just learned how to deal with it in different ways. Okay, so that was one lie that I'm like, bring it to life. My other thing that I want to bring, I said bring it to life. That's one kind of battle that I struggle with. It's just not being enough. And I want to bring that to light just to let you know, like I often feel that I'm not enough. And this, I have this inner struggle of self-doubt and anxiety. And these are things that have been really hard for me to face and realize that I'm dealing with those things. I used to take a lot of kind of pride in the fact that I didn't struggle with anxiety or depression. And I don't necessarily, am I making excuses? I don't know. I don't say that I struggle with depression as much as I do anxiety. And it's a new thing that I've had to struggle with and walk through. and it hasn't consumed me, but I have to realize it and recognize it. And the way I've started realizing and recognizing those feelings of anxiety is to sit in stillness, you guys. Do you know how hard that is for this Enneagram 7? So much of me just wants to move and be and go all the time, that sitting still with my own thoughts is like my own personal torture. I can't do it. It is so hard for me. And so I'm just starting slow, taking the time out of my day to just be still. Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard for me. And along with that is I feel like at times I give myself too much grace. I feel like we have gone into the season of like grace upon grace, and I still believe it, right? But I feel like I hear a lot of talk about grace upon grace upon grace, and I believe that, and I want that for my life. But in doing that, I lost vision in needing self-control and self-discipline, and that those things are also biblical. So my grace comes from that when I do mess up, like those are forgiven, those sins are forgiven. I have grace and strength in Jesus to keep pressing forward. But what I can't do is let it be an excuse to keep living a certain way. And so I've realized that I lack self-control and self-discipline. I mean, look, my podcast is proof of that. I've made up excuses in the past of like why I couldn't record, why I didn't take the time, and I could have, it just took a little bit of self-discipline, which is why I chose the word intentional living this year, just to check myself. Like, why am I doing a certain thing? Why did I need to get on my phone? That sort of thing. So that's two things I've confessed to you: not feeling enough, lacking self-control and self-discipline. And the third would be, in the past couple weeks and months, and even the past couple years, I've seen when these wounds of not feeling enough or lacking self-control is when I start to see myself fall into darkness and sin and shame and guilt. And that's when I start to hide. And so you guys promise me that you will reach out to me. Like, maybe that's a really lame thing to say. I don't even know if I should put this in there, but I am. If you ever like, hey, Bree, and you've been really quiet, what's up? What's wrong? Like, is there anything I can help you with? Like, ask me, because I like to be the cheerful, joyful one. I like to be positive. I never like to think anything negative is going on. And so my way of showing that is to close off completely, especially like social media. It's such a love-hate relationship when you have a business like we do, because it's something needed and I could definitely utilize it. But when it becomes like I have to, I get really stressed and overwhelmed. And so I just don't do it at all. And I've seen that happen in multiple areas of my life. So even those two things, I don't feel like either of those things are major struggles. There's definitely been other struggles in my life, but just two that I wanted to share with you. And so as I am talking with people about coming on the podcast, I've had a couple things in mind of people who have gone through similar struggles. And so a couple of those are like postpartum depression and anxiety, a recovering people pleaser, someone that has overcome paralyzing fear in their life, freedom from addiction, freedom from all kinds of things. I don't even know yet. But I've been thinking and talking with a couple people, and I'd really like to include that as part of the podcast, is just sharing people's stories and things that they've had to overcome in hopes that it would encourage someone out there listening. Because I really believe that we're not meant to keep those things for ourselves. Like, it's so easy to think no one else is going to benefit or be encouraged by our stories, but I don't think that's true at all. I think when we hear stories of other faith, it encourages our own faith, no matter what walk we're on. Wow. So I have talked way more than I anticipated in talking tonight, but I'm so thankful to have a platform like this to just talk and share. And I really like to talk my thoughts out with people. And I think that's another time that I kind of hole up, is if I'm not getting to do that, but maybe I shouldn't always do that. I don't know. I talk things out a lot. And so it's nice to have this and have people reach out and just kind of carry on a conversation with me. I kind of shared a little bit about Bring It to Light on a live video that I did on Salt and Light this week, and had 2 people immediately reach out to me and be like, I needed to hear that so bad, and like confess things that they've been dealing with. And they're like, I haven't told anyone this, but I have been struggling with it and I just have to tell somebody. So if you feel that way and you're like, I just need to tell someone, I promise you I am a safe place. I will listen. I'm working on the not talking because I don't want to say the wrong thing. And so to you, I'm just offering a listening ear. If you're listening to this and feel like you don't have anyone to share with, or that no one understands, I can't promise you that I've walked through something similar, and I can't promise I'll understand, but I can promise that I can be a friend and that I can listen and be here for you. All right, so let's wrap it up with that. I'm so thankful for you guys. I know I've said that 100 times, but it's true. And I will be having some guests on the podcast. I have finally figured out some systems and routines that are hopefully going to help me make this more organized. Because another thing, I'm not really a people pleaser, but I tend to not put things on the books because I'm afraid that I'm going to miss out on something better. And that is super hard for me to admit. But I noticed that I would avoid making set appointments just in case I needed to be like spontaneous or something would happen. And so now I'm choosing to like tell my time where to go. And so as I'm booking podcasts, guests, like that other thing is I would just be like, I don't know, when can you come on? I can do these things. And then we'd spend weeks like going back and forth on when they could come on the show. And so I've just set up a new way to get people scheduled that works for me and gives me boundaries, which I really need. So yeah, I also want to do an episode about boundaries. Okay, I'm going to stop. Thank you guys for tuning in from my hotel. I know it was probably a little bit echoey than you're used to, and so it won't always sound like this. But thank you guys for hopping on, and I will catch you on the next episode of the Dreamer and Doer podcast.